Well, hi there. Warm welcome. You watching Blueprint Explosive Exclusive, and I'm Meghna Dekha. Well, viewers, today we are going to be talking about the big copyright battle. Well, it is an all-out open war between the Indian news industry, the publishers, content creators, and OpenAI. This war is over the blatant and brazen loot of content which was being made by the content creators, but yet allegedly being stolen without even so much as a courtesy, without even any sharing of revenue. That's right, the Indian news industry has together now moved up and spoken out against the ChatGPT maker OpenAI for openly stealing our content or unlawfully using our content. In fact, it has the partnership agreements with media firms abroad, but wants Indian content for free. Why? Well, we are going to explain what's happening and why it's an all-out war right now. The focus is going to be just that on Blueprint Explosive Exclusive. Well, the India media outlets, let's give you the background here. The India media outlets have all come together. They've joined the lawsuit against ChatGPT maker OpenAI for using their copyright content without any permission and without any payment. Essentially, Indian firms have alleged that the work from their own websites is being copied unlawfully by OpenAI to train its AI models. And this includes ChatGPT models as well. So as per the Digital News Publishers Association, this is a clear violation of the intellectual property rights at the expense of the creative work which is done by the Indian content creator industry. OpenAI, of course, is all set to become a profit-driven business, and this would lead to a significant impact on the revenues of Indian news publishers as well. As per the reports, OpenAI says that its AI systems make fair use of publicly available data. Now, interestingly, similar issues of unauthorized use of articles have come up in the United States as well, not just in India, across the world. Globally, there are these problems of copyright infringements which have been coming up. In fact, around 2023, OpenAI had struck a licensing deal with international media outlets. So the question is, why can't they do the same here in India? Pay for the copyright content that they are using. Why steal it? Why is it freely copying content which is being made in India? Well, let's take you through what the lawsuit actually is. That's going to help you understand. The reason behind this lawsuit is that there's unauthorized mass copying of Indian copyright content by OpenAI. That is the biggest allegation. The case is about copyright content which is being used to train AI models of OpenAI, which includes ChatGPT. One of the biggest consumer bases for this, of course, is in India. What is the argument? The argument is that it poses a threat to the intellectual property as well as rights and the news industry itself, which is why it's important that the concern be addressed. The concern is the unlawful use of content which is a real threat to the press transparency as well, because at the end of it, as we all know, OpenAI, one of the biggest problems has been that of accountability as well. But now let's also explain why is it a concern for the Indian news industry, not only in the short term, but also in the long term. Let's explain what it is, the reason behind this case that they are fighting in the courts. Well, it benefits OpenAI and harms Indian news industry, something that they have said in the High Court as well, which is hearing the case. Also, it is a danger to the copyrights of digital news publishers, which is one of the biggest concerns which has been raised. It can lead to major ad revenue losses for news publishers because remember, when content is being stolen, there is no revenue sharing there. Revenue is being created and then being used by OpenAI and without a penny being shared with the original content creator from where they have stolen this allegedly. Also, they have said that OpenAI will benefit at the expense of Indian news outlets, which is one of the biggest concerns which has been raised. It can also undermine the diversity of the Indian press. One big reason for that, and also that OpenAI has entered into partnership agreements, as I was telling, in US as well. However, it doesn't have any such partnership. It doesn't have any such pacts or any agreements in India. The lack of transparency in OpenAI models can also erode the quality of news which is being made available to you, the person who is going to be consuming it. It can also become a threat to the reliability of the news content which is available, because as we all know that there are big issues when it comes to the accuracy of what OpenAI products such as ChatGPT can really give. So let me go across to two experts who are going to help us break it down and explain these concerns and why there's a pressing need to address this, not just in the courts, but perhaps even in the parliament with laws as well. We are today joined by Shri Parthasarthi. He is a partner and leader at Forvis Mazars. We are also joined by Pawan Dugal. He is a cybersecurity expert. Mr. Parthasarthi, I'm going to start with you first, because OpenAI, in its defense, it has said that it is only using publicly available data to train its OpenAI models. But the big difference here, something which they are perhaps willfully muddying the line, is there's a big difference when it comes to openly available data and when it comes to copyright content. For example, if I do an exclusive story here on our Times network, I would put it out, doesn't mean it's open for everyone else to use, because it is original content. Just because it's out in the open doesn't mean that it's free for use, isn't it?
It is. Just because I am across the border, that doesn't mean I can steal somebody else's content. And I think one thing that needs to be understood is today, whether it's a student who is in school or university who's doing a baseline article, or whether it's a school child who is basically in school, what do we teach them? We talk to them about plagiarism. We talk to them that you have to have references. You need to make sure you're giving credit to the original content. And I think that is what we primarily look at. And if I look at copyright infringement and other things that we look at, I think our laws are very clear in terms of copyright and what can be used and what cannot be used. You cannot primarily hide behind what I would call as geography. You can't hide behind technology from an AI perspective, saying that this is not human authorship. It is some algorithm that is basically compiling this particular information. And I think the onus of responsibility should not be with the author. The onus of responsibility should be with the AI engine and the person who's primarily creating that AI engine and training the model. It should be their responsibility to label the data, make sure there's traceability of information and where they're getting it, and provide full disclosure. And secondly, it is not after the fact where you provide the disclosure. If I am the author of something and you are planning to use my content, and if I tell you not to use that content, then you don't have any right to use that content. It's not about using it and later on saying that I just used it and I just morphed it and I basically and a disclosure, right? And next aspect is, if I generate the content and then further I'm generating revenue out of that, then there has to be a revenue share model that primarily exists between the two organizations. I think if I look at globally, most of these AI engines are establishing those clear content, those kind of contracts with media houses, with authors, with artists who are creating a lot of this information and all things. And I think it is very important that that particular same kind of a ruling apply here. And I don't think it should be very different just because you're across the border that you can steal my content.
Absolutely. They have these licensing issues. They have these agreements in US, but in India, they do not have any such pact. Now, Pawan Dugal, I'm going to come to you. This is a persistent problem, not just in this case, but OpenAI on the whole, about generating and giving out fake news. There are inaccuracies and the lack of accountability. Now, ANI, which is the petitioner in the case, it's raised concerns about what they are calling hallucinated responses being given by OpenAI. Should Indian courts also now ensure that accountability is fixed like it is? Even for us, anything that we broadcast, how can we not be accountable for what we are putting out? What if it is fake news, especially in a politically sensitive arena such as that of India?
Well, let's not comment on the merits of the case since it's sub judice, but reality speaking, please understand artificial intelligence algorithms are hallucinating left, right, and center. Though the makers of these AI algorithms are taking steps to control hallucination, yet currently it's not possible to fully get rid of hallucination primarily because of the big data sets that have been used for the purposes of training such AI algorithms. So this is a big event, and clearly, if the AI algorithm is hallucinating, there has to be legal liability of who can be made responsible for such hallucinated content. Because the chances are that the user is going to use this hallucinated content as correct, and thereafter is going to make certain decisions. And if after making certain decisions, the user suffers certain losses, damages, or injury, then who's going to be responsible for the same? Clearly, from an Indian standpoint, AI service providers are intermediaries under Section 21W of the Information Technology Act 2000. They are mandated to exercise due diligence while they discharge their obligations under the law. And as part of due diligence, it's mandatory upon them to take reasonable steps of security so as to minimize the level of hallucination. Now, once the matter goes before the court of law, the court then will examine what kind of due diligence parameters have been filled up by the said service providers, and then come to a conclusion to what extent that they can be made liable and what could be the consequent legal consequences that could arise out of the same.
In fact, let me circle back to Sri Parthasarathy, because you had mentioned about revenue sharing models. That's also one of the issues which is coming up in the court, because the fear is that they are going to leverage their own resources, their own power to prioritize copyright content, which a content creator would be creating. However, the ad revenue would still go to OpenAI because they are the ones pushing it out. Forget about revenue sharing. They'll literally be eating out of the revenue pie for the content creators as well, isn't it?
It is absolutely. I think if I take the journalists on the Times network and across the television network, across the various publishing houses that you basically have, whether it is in the print media or in the television media and other things, right? I think all of this particular content is painstakingly compiled. And what do you do? Even when you are bringing in content from other providers and other things, which is syndicated content, you're still paying for that. And that is how what you are doing is you're creating your original content, you're bringing in syndicated content, and that is how you are working on, and then you work on exclusives, which is how your TRP rating and other things basically increase. Suddenly somebody comes in, captures your information, which maybe your channel, because of the restrictions, are not available somewhere in the US. Somebody looks at Times New channel right now here and captures a lot of that particular information and starts pushing it to some other countries and saying that, hey, this is my particular content, and they are generating revenue out of that, or they are generating the TRP rating from that aspect. Then I think that's absolutely illegal. And if they are doing it without your particular knowledge, I think then they need to be brought up. Second is, I think it is for the Indian government and the Indian lawmakers to protect our particular the people here. And I think if we are generating the content and it's so rich and that is what it is, then everybody needs to look at it from that aspect. They need to pay for it. And if they don't pay for the least that they can do is give credit. But if they are generating revenue, they should also pay for it.
Absolutely. If you're generating revenue out of someone else's content, then share the revenue. Simple, isn't it? But Pawan Dugal, here's the problem. Across the world, and this is not just in India, even across in US, you have the New York Times, which is, even as we speak, seeking billions in damages for illegal use of its own archives by OpenAI as well. Shows that it's not just India, but globally now there is a movement, isn't it, that they cannot get away with this open loot.
Clearly, this is one of the big topical problem areas globally. Why? Because suddenly the AI algorithms have come to disrupt this copyright world ecosystem. Now, the world has come up with copyright laws primarily to give recognition to the creator who's created the original literary, dramatic or cinematographic work. But now comes in AI, which goes ahead and uses your original literary work and thereafter goes ahead and pawns it as part of a so-called authentic content, but it could be laced with a lot of hallucination.
Absolutely.
So this is bound to be seen to be some violation of the existing copyright laws. What exactly is the violation and how should the service providers be made responsible for the same will be dependent on the facts and circumstances of each case, which the court will have to look at as it proceeds forward.
Well, absolutely. The court will be looking into these case-specific issues which have been raised, specifically when it comes to revenue sharing, specifically when it comes to hallucinated information, fake news essentially, which is being thrown up by ChatGPT and other products of OpenAI, but also more significantly about the infringement of copyright issues without any prior information, knowledge, or permission. I think we can all agree, all of us agree, that the way forward is going to be, of course, in the courts, which is going to be looking at the specifics, but also the Indian government will have to step in and ensure that there are laws so that in future we do not have to deal with this kind of literal plagiarism. You can call it loot. It is sub judice right now. We are going to wait for a favorable outcome coming in from the courts, but also perhaps the lawmakers should be looking at drafting specific laws governing this. Thank you so much, Mr. Sri Partha Sarthi, for joining us, as well as Pawan Dugal, and breaking it all down for us.